we're going to have with us 4 different founders from the Asia and Berlin ecosystems to break down what they experience. And of course, this is part of the Asia-Berlin Initiative, which is a cooperation between the Berlin Senate and MPACT. Now, we begin with Rainer Seider. He, of course, is the Berlin Senate representative and deals with international cooperation. Rainer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Now, of course, it's Pride Month now. Why are discussions like this still important?
So I think Berlin has a long history in the acceptance of Pride community and accepting different forms of lifestyle. So even this morning, I read again that Magnus Hirschfeld, one of the pioneers of sexual research on homosexuality, being himself a gay person living in Berlin, and he was partnered with a gay medical doctor from Shanghai. So he was a Chinese German couple. So already at that time, so more than 100 years back, there was AsiaBerlin on the Pride topic and on the agenda. But since then, of course, the times developed. The big times for Pride communities were the 20s, of course, first. Then, of course, we had the problem of the National Socialism. But now, and for a long time already, even in East Berlin and in West Berlin, we had a long tradition of gay communities. And I think now Berlin is one of the most welcoming cities in worldwide and also in Europe for gay people who have the opportunity, or homosexual or LGBTQ plus queer people with the possibility to live their life and work in the society and also in the economy of Berlin. So I think it's quite attractive for those people to live in Berlin, to build up the city with the other Berliners already here or coming to Berlin together to build up something new, which is a very colorful rainbow city.
Now, of course, Berlin has a long history of LGBTQ plus acceptance, as you just mentioned. What is the relevance for the startup scene, and particularly the Asia and Berlin ecosystems?
I think, of course, the startup scene seems to be very tolerant. So we would suppose that there are no problems at all for LGBTQ plus people in this scene. But nevertheless, on all workspaces, even in startups or innovative companies, this is a question of coming out, of living your life as free as you would like to. So I think it's a topic, as we have already for female entrepreneurship, where we had already some events within AsiaBerlin. This is the first event on in the AsiaBerlin event series on queer topic. And I think it's very important to address that, not only because it is a topic in Berlin, but also in Asia. So in the same topic, the same reason that's true for female entrepreneurship, it's true for queer society as well. So it is important, I think, to have more networks between queer people in Berlin and in Asia to support each other, to strengthen, to empower each other, and also to network, having more cooperation. So I think what we have experienced in the female entrepreneurship topic, that's very true for the queer topic as well. And I'm very happy that it will be not only one event in the framework of the Pride June, but that we go on with the AsiaBerlin events on queer topics, and that we will have in the diversity track of the AsiaBerlin Summit in October, from 4 to 10 October, also addressing within more than one panel the queer topic. So it is a topic we will go on because we think it's urgently needed in the discussion between Asia and Berlin in the startup sector to talk about LGBTQ plus questions.
And of course, we were speaking earlier, this is quite significant right now because it's the European Championships happening. What's going on in Germany right now? Why don't you tell us about that?
So we will have tonight, we will lit up the stadiums with the rainbow colors. People say that this is also a political statement because we are playing, so Germany is playing, the German group is playing against Hungary, where there was last week passed a bill or law against homosexual advertisement and also teaching at schools. But of course, it is also in Berlin. It's also we will lit up the stadium in the rainbow colors because of the AsiaBerlin event on queer topics. So I think that's the real reason behind it's our event today.
Thank you very much, Rainer Seidel, Berlin Senate representative. And before we begin the discussion, we also have Asia Berlin Ambassador Athena Lam, who will share a few words before we begin the discussion.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, whether you're tuning in from Berlin, the Asia Pacific, or anywhere else in the world. I am from a tiny city called Hong Kong. And back in 2009, when I first moved there, Hong Kong barely knew the word startup. And so on the left side, you'll see that there is a group called Startups HK. It was started by a few people, Casey Lau, Jean Su, and a few others, who just decided to do a meetup to raise awareness and to talk about issues. And fast forward to 2020, and we have over 3,000 startups in Hong Kong alone.
Come a long way.
It has. And back in 2009, Hong Kong's queer community was also incredibly small. At that Pride event, we couldn't even fill half the basketball court that we were supposed to gather in. And in 2010, the event was canceled altogether. But fast forward to the last Pride event that I attended in Hong Kong in 2018, and we had thousands of marchers shut down the street. We had consulate generals who attended, and we were hosting regional LGBTQ activist groups. Not only that, Hong Kong actually also had become a host for workplace discussions. So for IDAHOT, we had workplace panels, global companies were hosting workshops. We also hosted LGBTQ organizations from around the Asia Pacific, and you'll even spot 2 members of Pussy Riot there. And at which point you'll wonder, okay, where's the Berlin connection? Well, my Berlin connection was actually made by AsiaBerlin. I was invited here back in 2017 to speak about the Hong Kong ecosystem. And not only did I connect to great founders here in Berlin, Berlin actually connected me to leaders in Asia. So every single person that you see in this photo right now has become a friend to me. And I am still connected to them, even though they're in Singapore, Korea, China, and one of them has actually moved to Vietnam. And in 2019, I finally made the move to Berlin. So here's a snapshot of Berlin's startup ecosystem today. It has nearly 5,000 startups, employing 250,000 people, which is just under 10% of the city's population. And of course, I'm not gonna lie, Berlin is also very attractive for its queer culture. And the company that I joined was just so normalized in how it accepted queer culture that we didn't even have an employee resource group because people were just that out. But I wanted an LGBTQ Slack channel anyway, so when I proposed it, my company decided to celebrate with rainbow cupcakes. And when I went to tech events, I also just found queer people everywhere. I found non-binary presenters, for example, at the Ally meetup. And Kai was just presenting about accessibility in the web. It was just this normal. But then I began to wonder, wait a second, where are the professional networks? Where can I connect to people beyond, for example, annual events like Unicorns in Tech? Where are the likes of HK Gala in Hong Kong or Fruits and Suits? And so here's a statistic I'll leave with you. 1 in 3 LGBTQI+ individuals and every other trans individual that you have met in Berlin has probably reported experiencing discrimination. And this report is not old. This was from last year in 2020, which means we have some work to do. And I want to ask this question. How do we reconcile the visibility and the diversity that we see on the streets and the experiences that people still face in the workplace? Are these experiences shared across borders? How do our queer identities shape our approach to work? How do they shape the communities and the organizations that we found? And how do we build communities that support each other? And what are the learnings and resources that queer founders can share between Asia and Berlin, between global companies and emerging ones? Of course, I have asked far too many questions to answer in this hour-long discussion today. However, this is only the start, thanks to AsiaBerlin's commitment to discussing diversity. And I'm honored to be having this public discussion today with Charlene, Lex, and Thomas with the guidance of Jad.
Thank you very much, Fina. We're delighted to have you with us and some really important insights there. Without further ado, I want to open up the discussion. So we are, of course, joined by Athena. We also have with us Charlene Liu. She's the co-founder of Diversity and Inclusion Consulting and Ladies Who Tech, as well as founding Shanghai Pride. Also with us, Lex Gillen. She's the CEO of Modality Group. She's coming in right now. And in Hong Kong, Thomas Guang. He's the COO of the recruitment platform Happier.io. Now, I want to begin with a question to Thomas. A major thing that we discuss is coming out at work. What are red and green flags in workplaces, and how do you identify them?
Thanks for the question, Jad. Working in HR, it's definitely an interesting, I'd say, topic, especially in such a conservative region of the world. So growing up Asian American, being Asian, you go into every situation figuring out whether or not you should come out. So I've only been out at work in my most recent company, which is Happier.io. But previously, I felt like I wasn't really in a safe enough environment that promoted and allowed me to come out. So I guess some flags you can look at really are how open they are at the workplace, the bureaucracy, how much can you really push for changing the workplace and the culture, and if there are allies there that can support you. Do you have a network there that will be supportive? But it's really something that I think that shouldn't be the case. Everyone should be able to come out and bring their true self to work because it really makes a huge difference. And I didn't realize that until I came out at work this year, or in the past 2 years at work.
And do you guys have anything you want to add to that? What are red and green flags, in a workplace for you, and as a founder, but also as someone who's worked in these kinds of things?
Yeah, no, it's a great. For me, when I go into a workplace, I start from the very beginning, testing the waters. So like from the interview, I might mention my wife. I might casually just ask questions about their openness, if they have diversity and inclusion initiatives, like what's their HR policies, and just kind of test it from the beginning. Because for me, I don't want to get into a situation where I'm actually working in the company and feeling uncomfortable. Right. I want to know from the beginning, we can walk away if it doesn't work out.
And of course, you've also worked across the world in the Asia-Pacific region and now in Berlin. How would you describe the climate for LGBTQ plus people in Europe and Asia-Pacific, particularly Berlin?
Cool. So yeah, I've lived in a lot of places. I worked in Shanghai for 3 years. And for me in Shanghai, I didn't feel the pressure to come out at work. I had a thriving social life outside of the office, so it wasn't really a high priority for me. But when I moved to Berlin, one of the key reasons for me coming here was that, on the ground, it's so much energy, right? Everything is buzzing. There are queer people, there are brown people everywhere. It's very diverse. So I really wanted to I wanted to be in this vibe. And so when I went into the office and then into the workplace, one of the tensions I felt was that the diversity in the office didn't match the energy that I was feeling in the city. And it made it a little bit challenging for me to actually integrate and adapt into the city itself.
Thank you so much. Does anything you want to add to that, Athena? What are the misconceptions generally that you experience? And some really good insights there.
Yeah, for sure. I would second everything that Lex has just said. And at the same time, I think that there are stereotypes and then there are misconceptions. And sometimes I think one of the stereotypes that a lot of Asian cities may get is that they're more traditional, and therefore you cannot necessarily bring your full self to work. And I think there's a lot of gray space in between that. There's a lot of diversity even within Asia. Asians are not one body, and so it's recognizing how do people actually communicate, perhaps in different ways. Someone who's out here in Berlin may show it differently in Asia, and I think these are the types of nuances that we can be more attuned to. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Charlene, you of course founded Shanghai Pride. What misconceptions do you see about the Asia-Pacific region and how they navigate LGBTQ issues? having a bit of...
I think...
sorry.
Yeah, I'm saying that Asia Pacific is not one body. It's also very diverse. You know, coming from, I actually moved from Singapore to, I moved from Malaysia to Singapore. I followed a girl. And that didn't work out. And then in Singapore, I moved to Shanghai about 16 years ago. So I saw quite a bit of difference between actually Singapore and coming to Shanghai, right? I thought it was going to be a more conservative community and society. I thought I was not going to find anybody in the LGBTQ community, but lo and behold, you know, I was pleasantly surprised. I felt actually more comfortable here in terms of like hanging out or in community at large. But having said that, of course, because I have worked in the semiconductor manufacturing environment for 20 years. So coming out, it still has this, I would say, coming out in a manufacturing environment, I still feel that it's still very conservative, right? Because it's very male dominated. Even gender diversity is a topic that is not far-reaching yet. So I was afraid. I was totally afraid. But in my last job, my last corporate job, I was like, Lex, I came out in the beginning. I came out at my first interview. And I just said, you know, what I've done before. I volunteer as a Shanghai Pride organizer, and they're like, oh, we know about that. And then, you know, that's how the conversation carried on to be like, okay, I see that the people here are inclusive, they're friendly, and they are allies. So, and we hit it off. Yeah, so, you know, it took me a while. Okay, I have to say, it took me like 40 years before I really came out. But again, coming out in it's a personal journey. No matter where you are, it doesn't matter what region you live at. It's a personal journey. Yeah, back to you, Jack.
Okay, great. And I wanted to move the discussion along a little bit to finding allies and navigating workplace dynamics. Why do LGBTQ plus professionals, you know, need allies, and what does good allyship look like? Maybe start with Vina with this one.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is they can do a lot with the small gestures that they do make every day at work. So, for example, just asking about someone's pronouns when you first meet them, using the word partner rather than jumping straight to girlfriend or boyfriend. There are all these small behavioral changes that allies can do in their conduct. And then there's the more systematic ones. So for example, setting up employee resource groups, mentoring someone who might be identifying as queer, getting them into the meetings and featuring them, giving them platform. So there's small and there's more committed and big ways that people can do that. But it's just like professional development. Mentorship is really important, and having that formalized process as well as the informal human interactions, all of that kind of needs to come together at work for allies to support queer individuals to do the best work that they can.
Yeah, I mean, that's an absolutely great point. And I think it ripples outwards, right? Like, we're talking about this in the context of LGBTQ, but if you really think about it, when you accommodate one population, everyone thrives, right? Not assuming things, being more open, more listening, more empathetic, actually creates an environment for everyone to thrive, not just queer people.
Very good point. And Charlene and Thomas, would you like to add anything to that? What makes good allyship?
Being an ally, it's also like it's a spectrum, right? Just like gender, it's a spectrum. You can start being an ally doesn't mean that you will know absolutely everything about LGBTQ community, the issues, challenges, right? It can be starting off with having a flag maybe at on your table during Pride Month. You know, just showing subtle support is also very encouraging. Of course, then you have on the other end of the spectrum, like a super ally, where you know about the issues, you actually advocate for equality, and you actually stand up and speak out against discrimination if you see something like that against your colleagues or friends. So little things, can make you an ally. Some people tell me, hey, you know what? I don't know if I am a good ally. There is no such thing as a good ally or bad ally. It's just maybe are you a junior ally or a super ally?
Thomas, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have allies because it's your support system. I remember in previous companies where I wasn't really out to the management, but had some close friends in there. And whenever management would try to maybe set me up with girls because of business meetings and sales negotiations, it would feel a bit awkward for me. But then they would be there to sort of support me, say, hey, look, like, not everyone has to follow the traditional stereotype male and female. And so that was really helpful. So I think good allies are people who are there for you, whether it's one-on-one or in the group setting, but just really to support you and let you know that you are in a safe space and that you can be yourself.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm just thinking, how important is the formation of networks? Do networks exist in Berlin and Asia for LGBTQ plus tech professionals?
You want to take that?
I think this one's yours.
All right. So I think that the good news is that there are growing networks. So I'd mentioned Unicorns in Tech just earlier. They are one of the largest and oldest LGBTQ conferences, workplace conferences, and they are more tech focused, and they have expanded their programming to include the Panda Network. They just finished Sticks and Stones this month. So there is that growing visibility. There's Proud at Work for Germany. And then even in Hong Kong, like there's HK Gala just for the gay and lesbian community in the legal professions. And then there's Fruits and Suits. There's a whole number of them. And then actually Charlene also has founded a great network. Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a growing body, and I'd love to have more both in the corporate setting across multinationals as well as in the grassroots level.
I'd be curious to know what you, not to co-op your question asking, but what do you find the benefit of having professional networks for LGBT population? Like, what are the key benefits? Because I think one of the things, I actually have never joined a network for it. I've never seen the reason to. And so, but I'm glad they exist, right? Like, I'm never going to be like, oh, I wish, inclusion, what's that? But I am curious, like, what can we get from these kinds of organizations that we maybe can't get from any other type?
Yeah, that's a really good question, I think.
Maybe we could ask that to Charlene, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Charlene Liu, of course, runs Ladies Who Tech. What are the benefits of having networks or forming networks?
Actually, I wanted to answer the question. Okay, first let me put a disclaimer out there, right? It's like we form network. It doesn't mean that we're being exclusive. We want to point that out because a lot of people will say, "Oh, you have this special network." So does it mean that we're not part of it just because we're not in banking or we're not queer? So no, it's not about that. It's about really supporting each other. Okay, so we have this. We started something called Intercompany Pride Network a couple of years ago. And what this network does is we connect D&I leaders or HR from corporations who want to share the best practices on how to implement diversity and inclusion, especially for the LGBTQ employees. So because it is still a fairly new concept here, but people are really interested. Companies are really interested to be more inclusive for their staff. So this network is like, it's like supporting each other. Like we actually share resources. And what is so encouraging about networks like these, it's that even competitors, right? Even business competitors, they get together and they share because, when it comes to D&I, it's, you don't compete. Yes, there is friendly competition. Is that, oh, my benefits are better than yours, maybe. But there is no such thing as, okay, I'm not going to share with you because if you know more, then you're going to steal my business or something like that. So I think it is important in terms of for sharing purposes. The other one is you asked a question about Ladies Who Tech, and I want to say that Ladies Who Tech is actually inspired by Lesbians Who Tech. I was in San Francisco in 2015 on my way to getting married. And I stumbled upon this group. I was so inspired by it. And I thought that, you know what, I want to bring it to China. But of course, calling it Lesbians Who Tech would be a little bit too provocative here. So that's why we changed it to Ladies Who Tech. But what it does is really to, again, inspire each other, having role models to encourage more young women to be in tech. And sometimes also, again, corporations also share, like, what's going on, how to improve inclusion.
Thank you very much, Charlene. And Thomas, do you want to add anything to that? Do you know anything about networks that exist in the Asia-Pacific region? I know you're in Hong Kong.
Yes, so I think it's super important to join these networks for support and also networking. I think it's because of these programs that I was able to join this panel today. I think Steph from a community business LGBTQ plus mentorship program introduced us. And that program is one of the first queer communities or networks I've joined recently. And it actually helped me build confidence to be able to speak so openly. This is my first time speaking open like this. And I remember one of the mentors there, Hiroko, was saying, I think it was touching on what Lex and Charlene was saying, even before joining the company, she always brings up her identity, because in maybe Hong Kong, it's not as open, or people aren't expecting it in the interviews. So by speaking about it, you're learning about the company culture, whether or not it's open and welcoming. But at the same time, you're also pushing for change, because people who may not know about it or are against it are learning and hearing more, okay, this is what people are looking for when they're joining a company. And because she was so in high demand because of her skills, she was able to negotiate different benefits for her spouse and just get more people aware of this. So she pushed me to speak more, because she said she wants to speak for other people who aren't able to speak. So that's why I'm here today. Thanks to her and Steph.
I see you nodding, Lex.
No, it sounds amazing, right? Like, I think I am multifaceted in terms of, like, I'm Black, I'm queer, and I'm female. And so sometimes you have to choose your dominant minority, if that makes any sense.
Your dominant disadvantaged group.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think I resonate more with being Black in terms of looking for community and finding networks, and I've kind of dealt with the queer thing on my own. But now that I've heard these opportunities, I'm like, oh, maybe I need to get more connected, right? So I think this is a really cool learning experience for me.
Now, Thomas, of course, you also run happier.io, which is a recruitment human resources platform. What I want to ask to you is, can work cultures be reshaped once they're already entrenched? Like, what factors do founders have to consider if they want to adapt to the conversations that are happening?
I think it's a really good question. I think it depends on a few aspects. It depends on, first off, the size of the company. Because I'm in such a small startup, it's a lot easier to influence and make immediate change. But if you're in a larger corporation that has more bureaucracy, you have to get through different levels, which is why it's very important to have allies to support you and push the agenda ahead. The second thing I'd say is definitely the industry and the region, just because some areas may be a bit behind in terms of being more open and accepting. But I think that's one of the beauties of really speaking up in the interview and also speaking up once you join a company. And it's about weighing the risk. Do you want to go in and be the first person? It's going to be a lot harder to push, but it's definitely a place that's needed. Or do you want to go into a company that's more already accepting? Then you're able to contribute, but it won't be as big as going in there and really fighting for what's right. So I think it's really brave of people here to really go in even before the interview, because you're actually risking the chance to work there by sort of being your true self. But at the same time, it's pushing an agenda, because it's getting people to think about it and really getting people to acknowledge that, okay, I really need to adapt diversity, inclusion if I want to attract the best talent.
And which factors do you consider though? Like, so can change come from the bottom up, as you say, or does it often come from the top down?
I think it comes from either way. It really depends where you are. I think it should come from both, actually. because it's so different each level, the way that you are sort of being treated.
Was like the word diversity has become a buzzword now. It's everywhere, in every industry, particularly in the global northwest. I just want to ask you, why is it important now? Why has this become, in recent times, such a big discussion?
Well, I mean, there are several, world phenomenon, especially when you focus on the U.S. with George Floyd, and these things are becoming more top of mind in people's discussion. Obviously, there are also like these Harvard Business Review cases that are telling like these are the benefits of diverse workforce, better products, better innovation, more, just more money on your bottom line. So it's like something that behooves people to pay attention to. But, as I think we were talking before, diversity is hard, right? When you have a diverse workforce, you have people from all over the place with different perspectives. It's actually harder in the short term to have a diverse workforce. So I wish people understood before they started like just touting these phrases and just saying, hey, I'm diverse, that they really understand the pre-work and the foundations they have to implement before they can actually accommodate a diverse employee base.
I can see Athena nodding there. Do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, Lex. There's a responsibility that comes with the label of diversity. And I think one of the things that companies that may be very overeager to adopt the word, they have a very rude awakening when they encounter that friction, because diversity does come with friction, and it comes with that reflection of what is the bottom line? What bottom lines do we need to rethink, and what is actually okay and not okay, because we're not looking at just precedent anymore. We can't just point back to what was done and rely on that being right, because we know that the systems that exist today are actually not equitable. And so charging into very rough waters, really, and trying to navigate that with a whole team and maybe a whole, a massive ship is a daunting task, but it's a worthwhile one.
Yeah, because the friction is the point, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Charlene, why is there a reluctance to diversify, in your opinion?
Well, people don't like to change what is already working or stagnant, right? I mean, we all don't really like change that much. And this is a big thing. It's like changing mindsets, like possibly changing cultures, changing a culture of company. We have to be thinking differently. I'll give you an example. Using pronouns, that is, oh my God, it's not easy to implement. Sometimes I get it wrong too. So of course, the more difficult it is, then people are reluctant. But again, Lex mentioned before, it's all in the data. Data has shown that diverse teams make better decisions 87% of the time. And then I give you another example about products. Back then, when airbags first came out, right, they used a crash test dummy that represents the physique of men. So when the airbags were on the roads and there was an accident, it actually killed the women and the children, because there were no crash test dummies that had the measurements of the physique of the women. So these are things that, hey, it's not only about numbers, it's actually about safety.
Thank you very much, Charlene. And we have some questions now coming in from our audience. The first one is for Athena. What is your opinion of rainbow washing? Is all visibility good visibility?
Wow, our audience has just started with a big one.
Jumped in.
Yeah. I'm going to say, I think there are different opinions in this, and I want to say that mine only really represents my own. I personally am more interested in the team. I'm interested in the people that I work with, and I'm interested in the 8 hours that we spend together. So I had this conversation just yesterday, actually, with our head of people, who is bisexual Muslim. And my company does have a rainbow version of its logo. We did not put it up this year. But I filled Slack with pride emojis, and people are using them. And for me, I think that's more important, the fact that people feel comfortable and safe to do that, because that proves that it's a good and safer work environment for the people that are there. And from that, just going to what Charlene was saying as well, it actually emanates to other things like product as well, product development and how we develop them, how we position our marketing, whether we're renaming and rethinking our product terms. So one of the things that we changed in the company was blacklist, whitelist. It sounds very official. It's very commercially accepted, but it's also racist. And it's easy to change it to allow list and deny list. And so I think LGBTQ topics and queer topics are actually a gateway topic to thinking about what are the things that we have not considered before and how can we do better.
Do you think allyship has improved in the last few years? Do you think allyship has improved in the last few years?
Ish. I think awareness that one should be an ally has happened, right? I think people know that they're supposed to be working with us. I think there's still education to be had, though. So that's going to be a process.
What do you think? Do you think allyship has improved in the last few years?
Maybe Charlene has something to add.
Do you have something you want to add? Has allyship improved in the last few years?
Actually, I want to jump in on the question about rainbow washing or pink washing, right? So for me personally, is any visibility right now for LGBTQ, like in terms of logos or products, it's still good because we need to have that conversation going first, right? Yes, sometimes I get really mad when companies or brands that just put a product that has the 6 pride rainbow colors out there, and then you look into their policies, there is nothing about being inclusive to their LGBT employees. It makes me mad. But the fact that they can start, that starts the conversation, right? So you have something out there that's rainbow, you can always go back to the company and say, hey, what have you done for your LGBT company? Do you have this? It gets them to start thinking about things. So for now, I think I won't say that I like rainbow washing, but it gets the foot at the door, whether we want to call it coming out of the closet or not. So that's my take. Back to you.
Okay, and I have a question for everyone. We've seen strides in the discussion about the LGBTQ plus community in the global Northwest. How can discussions decenter away from white, gay, cis males and become more reflective of the entire spectrum?
Another heavy question.
Yeah, I'm liking these audience questions.
I like it, yeah. Can I go first?
Charlene, how do we decenter the discussion so everyone is included truly?
Okay, so my partner and I, we go on LinkedIn, my diversity and inclusion consulting partner, we always go into LinkedIn, right? And we call out D&I panels that are just all male, white male. We're like, if you want to talk about D&I, you have to first have a diverse panel. So, and another example, if you want to talk about inclusion in Asia Pacific, you have to have someone from Asia Pacific, someone who is probably local or who've lived here for a long time to discuss the issues at hand, because we probably know the area better, maybe, okay? I mean, of course, we welcome men, we welcome allies. It is very important, but I think it has to be a mix. It's also about, it's like a company, it's like the board, right? This is the same thing. Every organization should be diverse.
I mean, it definitely has to be diverse and it has to be mixed, especially if we're talking about like people's lived experiences are different, even if they're living in the same place. So for example, like Charlene and I actually met in Shanghai in like 2011, 2012, right? And my experience as a Black American person living in Shanghai is going to be vastly different than Charlene's experience as an Asian person living in Shanghai. So it's like, I float like me living in Shanghai, I'm just kind of coasting on an expat life, right? Whereas it might not be the same for people who are more local or can be assumed to be local.
Definitely.
So it's not a monolith.
Definitely not, no.
No. I think the other thing about decentering actually just comes from the word itself as well. It is that there is a center, and the people at the center need to make space. And so they need to step back, and they need to give that platform to other people. So a very concrete way to do that is, okay, if you have been invited to the event, recommend someone else. Exactly. It's as simple as that. You already have the foot in the door.
But what's holding them back from doing that? Why is that not happening?
Well, I mean, you know, there's a range of reasons. I'd like to think that sometimes it's just momentum. Sometimes it's just that people didn't think about it. It's someone asked me, I have 5 seconds to answer, and it's like, yes, no. But
Unconscious bias almost.
exactly. But if you just took the extra 55 seconds, you would probably have the name of someone that you just really respect and think would actually add to the discussion really well. So I think people being conscious of just bringing more names that we don't see to the table would be great.
Fair point.
Yeah.
And I want to ask the next question to Thomas. Why is there, and to go back to our earlier question, what can be lost with diversity? Why is there some feet dragging going on? Of course, you work for happier.io, which is a human resources platform.
I mean, like Charlene said, it's people are comfortable in the status quo, so it's hard to change and hard to bring up. I think with the current situations around the world, with COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, and the Asian hate in the US, people are starting to pick up and realize we need to speak about this, start a conversation, and make changes. So I think it's definitely changing faster lately, but still not fast enough. And also one interesting thing, we call those panels, all the guys on there, at least in the community here, we call them manels, and we try to stay away from them, all male panels. But going back to the diversity question, I think it's just people are comfortable, so they really need to be introduced to new perspectives, which is why I think Charlene mentioned about the rainbow washing, at least it's starting the conversation. So by initiating it, then we can start to see more change. And I think that's also the power of allies, is to step up because they can speak for other people maybe who aren't comfortable enough to speak, or to stand up to their managers or the companies.
And how can technology be used to change the social and political situation? Is there anything, startups can do directly that addresses this imbalance? Final question there.
I'd be afraid to use technology as a proxy or as a substitute for human empathy. I don't know, I still haven't watched Coded Bias, but the principle remains the same of bias in data sets, and data being a direct map of societal bias, right? And so if we're already getting it wrong in everyday life, I'm not sure I really want to trust the machines to help us. I mean, maybe not just help us, but just, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you started from probably at least a position that I agree with, in the sense that I think we cannot be complacent that tech is the silver bullet. Tech is an amplifier, and it's an amplifier of what already exists. And so it also holds a lot of potential in that sense. It has the potential, for example, to connect us right now across the world. And so the question is more like, how are we designing tech, and what are we building to create a more human and more equitable society? So for example, like my company today, we're working on digital identities, and unfortunately, irrespective of what you think about it, with this pandemic, it's the future. And so the question should be, how do we do it responsibly?
Sure.
How do we create a more humanized digital identity that's accessible for everyone? And by everyone, I mean not just, for example, Black, queer individuals who identify either as female or as non-cis male, but also accessible in terms of for people who cannot see. The web is not very accessible right now, but ableism. And so how can we imagine more? And I do think that tech has a lot of opportunity for that. And actually, I would say that Berlin is an ecosystem that has that imagination still, and that's why I enjoy being here.
Thank you very much. And I was leave final words to Charlene. How can we make it more equitable, more human? You've obviously been at this for a few years. You started Shanghai Pride. What do you want to see happen so that we can have more visibility, more diversity in a true sense and not a performative sense?
I think having a diverse and inclusive world, it takes effort from everyone, every entity. It's you, it's me, it's the community, it's even schools, it's companies, organizations, it's governments. I think we all need to get together to make a long-lasting change. Of course, just now you asked a question about top-down and bottom-up, which is important. Both are important, like Thomas said. But sometimes the top doesn't really move that much. The bottom is more active. Sometimes it's the other way around. So I think everybody just has to keep doing their part and don't give up. I say that because I'm actually telling myself that don't give up, because this work about inclusion is very difficult. But I have to say, technology does help in a bit, because here we are at this round table, all connected to talk about something very important during Pride Month. I mean, in the past and pre-COVID times, we don't even do this. We don't connect cross borders. So I think we should continue using tech. However, like Lex was saying, it cannot be replacement to humanity, because ultimately we need that empathy. We need the good in us to pass down to the next generation, to other people, when it comes to inclusion, because it's us. We have to be in our hearts, being able to be inclusive. Then we can make that ripple effect.
Thank you very much, Charlene. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for this very, very timely discussion. Please stay with us for our upcoming virtual networking event, where you can ask any of our panelists any questions you have. But before that, a short video about our upcoming AsiaBerlin Summit.
I am pleased to welcome you here today to the AsiaBerlin Summit.
The competition is extremely high in Asia. They're really always on the rise. What's the next idea and how you can scale it, how you can improve yourself.
The people are very open-minded in general in here. So when it comes to regulations, trying new things, trying new concepts, the energy here is just right for that.
Something around 3,000 connections have been formed with people that have been networking together,
where people were genuinely interested in learning, and likewise seeing a diverse set of investors that aren't necessarily continuously promoted, but yet come from different areas.
In reality, I think it is conferences like this which brings people from really far geographies together in a somewhat cozy setting. I think that's when true connections are forged, and a lot of these conversations will continue after the conference ends.
And that sadly brings us to the end of our live discussion. Do stay with us. You can talk to any of our panelists in our breakout rooms. There's a chat room where you can network with them directly. I'll end with saying Happy Pride Month, and do stay with us.
Hello everybody, this is a quick intro how breakout rooms work and how to operate them. So the moment where the breakout rooms become active, I can see this button down here, breakout rooms. I click that button and I see the different rooms. Now I can join in this room, which brings me to the room 1. In here I can now do 2 different things. One is I can leave the room and either leave the entire meeting or just leave the breakout room and go back to the main room. Or I can actually go to a different breakout room by clicking on this button. The main room will always be a tech support room, so if you have a question how to operate the breakout rooms, you can return back to the main room and get your answer from the moderator.
And all our panelists are now setting up for the breakout rooms. They are chat rooms where you can directly virtually network with them and ask any questions that you might have for any of our panelists. So we'll be logging on in the next few minutes, so if you prepare, they'll be waiting for you.
Yeah.
Happy Pride Month.